Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this latest live training event from Conservation Careers. My name's Nick. I'm the founder and director of Conservation Careers, and it gives me a huge pleasure to be welcoming you to this webinar, which is all about conservation project management and design. Now, wherever you are, I hope you're all safe and well. I'm sorry we're like a minute or two late. We're about as close as we're going to get. We did have some audio problems now, which are all resolved. So it's nice to kind of see people joining in and good to kind of see you on the call. Just kind of getting a little look over here. We've got 61 people on the call. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you all. Now, you're all here to learn about the importance of conservation project management and design and how something called the conservation standards, can help you to create a better conservation impact and also help to make you more employable at the same time. Now, before we dive in, I just want to start off by, I'd love to hear from you guys on the call. If you could jump into the chat box, and if you can give me your name or share your name and where you are, that'd be wonderful. So I'm Nick. I'm in the UK. I'm in a little place called Oundle. It'd be lovely to hear, where are you and who are you as well, just to give some context and kind of see, where you guys on the call, are based this evening or morning or nighttime or wherever you are. Okay. And as you do that, I'd like to start by really kind of introducing our guest speaker for this evening. Okay, so our guest speaker is Felix Chabula. Felix is a certified conservation standards coach, a facilitator and a trainer as well in the standards. He's trained teams from over 45 countries in the standards and also has been working as an independent consultant for conservation management for over a decade. Okay, he's also the course leader of our latest training program, which is Conservation Project Management and Design, which we'll hear more about towards the end of the webinar. So welcome, Felix. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us on the call. It's great to see some people also joining in the chat. Thank you for sharing where you are.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nick.
Good to see you there. So let's see who we got on the call already. We've got Paula. You got chat is disabled. Oh no. Okay, let me see if I can enable chat. Can I enable chat somewhere? Feel free to use the Q&As. Okay, if you can use that instead for now. Panelists can chat, attendees can chat with everyone, right? Okay. Has that helped? Okay, attendees can chat with everyone. Try again. I'm sorry about that. Obviously a little Zoom hiccup, but if you can, good, it's working now. Thank you. Great. Sorry for that. Okay, so Paula, welcome. Elena, yeah, okay, I can see people jumping in now. Kerry from Virginia, USA, welcome. Thank you everyone for, I can see you in the chat now as well. So Dina from Belgium, Sophie from Watford in the UK, Natalia from Russia. Okay, we got some from, it's flying through. Welcome everyone from Nigeria. I can see Netherlands, Cameroon, Egypt, Ukraine. Heart goes out to you guys. Mexico, Ecuador. We've got a global team on here. Felix, it's
fantastic.
It's great to see you all. Paul from Epsom as well, someone from the UK and Belize. Wow, great. You're blowing me away. Lovely to see you all. Welcome, one and all. Thank you for sharing as well. And sorry for that little kind of chat hiccup. Now, so this webinar, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the importance of project management and design skills in conservation. Okay, and what we're going to cover in the next hour, and we'll kind of make sure that we finish on time here for you. Okay, is four things really. The first thing is, why is project management and design, why are those skills so important for conservationists and conservation in general? So let's just kind of have a little chat around that and kind of frame the session around, the importance of these skills. Secondly, what are these things called, the conservation standards that you might have heard about, speaking about over the last, few weeks or so, and you might be interested in sort of leaning into it and want to find out a little bit more. So we're going to dig into detail about what are the standards, where they come from, why were they created, and how can they help you. Then thirdly, we're going to talk about, what is this new training course that we've developed and that you can enroll in this week. It closes this Friday, called Conservation Project Management and Design. Okay, we'll talk a bit about that, okay, but just a little bit towards the end. And then we're going to have a session for you guys, really, which is a Q&A. So any questions you might have about anything you hear this evening, you're very welcome to be asking questions, and we're here to kind of answer those questions. If you do have questions, two things, one is try and keep them quite short, please, because it's quite hard to read kind of big questions. If you can keep them, say, like a sentence maximum, that's great. That really helps us. Please use the question button. We've already proved that works, so that's great. So use the question button. And if you see questions dropping in, guys, you can upvote them as well. So at the end, when we get to Q&A, we will kind of work from the top and work down, okay, according to how much time we have available. So you can ask questions as we go. You can also feel free to wait to the end, because some of them might get asked as we go, okay, and ask them then. But use the Q&A button, keep your questions short, vote the ones you really like the look of. Okay, that's the kind of housekeeping. Okay, so before we kind of get into a discussion as to why they're important, what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to launch a little poll. Okay, I'm going to ask a question of you. Okay, so you should see a poll pop up on your screen now, which asks, have you taken any conservation project management or design courses previously? So have you been trained at all in kind of conservation project management or design, previously? Okay, so as you're thinking about that, I can see the poll results coming in. I get the sneaky peek at my side. Okay, let's just talk briefly about why these skills might be important for conservationists. So projects are how much of conservation is done. Okay, it's kind of like, it's like the pixel size, if you like, of activity within the sector, which is dominated by charities, and it's funded by donors who often like to support projects. Okay, they are distinct packages of work which are really seeking to tackle a specific problem or, I guess, achieve a specific goal. A well-designed and managed project can make a huge impact for wildlife and people that are involved, and it can set, clear goals. It can help you to understand problems, test assumptions, adapt, learn, share knowledge, helping us individually, but also as a global movement to get better every time. Okay, that's so important. Save more species, save more sites, save more habitats. Conversely, a poorly designed and managed project can lead to lots of wasted, precious time and money. Okay, and even worse, it can cause detrimental impacts on the wildlife and people we're trying to help. So it's no surprise really, therefore, that when we did a bit of a review and we analyzed over 35,000 conservation jobs from our site that's gone through the site over the last few years, we found a whopping 55% of employers looking for some aspect of project design or management skills. Okay, so it's really important across the board. Employers are looking for it across lots of different job types. Okay, but, and let me just end the poll there. Thank you everyone for sharing your results. I will share the results now. You should be able to see them on screen. And it really reflects, I think, what we're seeing in the sector so far. Is that only a small proportion of professional conservationists or even aspiring conservationists, if that's you as well, okay, are formally trained in these essential skills. So you can see here on screen, 79% of you guys on the call, haven't received any training in this so far, but yet it's so vital, it's so important for success for you and also for anything that you're involved with through the sector. Felix, does that sort of, surprise you? Does that reflect, I guess, your experience of what you've seen in the sector so far as well?
It's always surprising to see those numbers, but it's not the first time that I have seen those numbers,
right,
put it that way. But yeah, it's not uncommon, actually.
Yeah. So, I mean, really, I think the message is, if you want to have more impact more quickly and become a bit more employable as well, these skills are really vital. And also, I think also the survey results kind of show that it helps you to kind of to be a little bit more competitive as well. 80% of people, if you're applying for jobs as a job seeker, a student, a switch or something like that, don't have training in these skills, okay? And employers are looking for them. So it can kind of help to get you through that shortlisting as well, and help you get through that difficult barrier of often securing the first job, which is the hardest one, and your career can flow from there. Okay, so if they're so important, where do we start? Okay, so luckily we have a widely adopted set of principles and best practices that combine concepts and approaches and terminology, and they're called the conservation standards. Well, that's the short version. We're going to hear the longer version in a minute from Felix. And I'm going to hand over actually to Felix at this point, where you're going to tell us a little bit more about what are the conservation standards. Okay, so what are they? Where have they come from? Why were they developed? And I guess, how could they help people as well? So over to you, Felix. Give us a little bit of a 101 whistle stop tour of the conservation standards.
Sure. Thanks, Nick. Actually, you already mentioned quite a lot of very important points here. I assume you can see my full screen of the presentation and not the back end of PowerPoint, right? Perfect.
Yep, seeing it absolutely full screen.
Perfect. All right. So just a quick intro. I'm based in Berlin in Germany. And as Nick said, I have been working with the conservation standards and with conservation teams for the past, I think it was, 12 years, something like that. And what I really do is I, as Nick mentioned, I train people in project management and design and implementation, but I also guide teams through certain types of processes. So not always do teams want to be trained in the standards as the entire cycle, but sometimes they only want to do like a strategy evaluation. Sometimes they only go through a midterm review or a final project or program review at the end of the project cycle. And that is when we would also then choose certain tools from that approach, from the conservation standards, and apply them to the needs or to the situation that team is facing. So I just wanted to mention that up front, that you don't have to apply the standards from start to end, and it's great if you do, but see it more as a toolbox. So that's how I always see it. And you pick those tools that are supporting your work, that try to get you to the next step, and that help you be more informed, take better management decisions or strategic decisions. But in general, yeah, we're talking about an entire cycle that has it all, and I'm going to show you that in this small little presentation. All right, let me get set up here. So the conservation standards, or as they're also called, the open standards for the practice of conservation. The shorthand is much more digestible, conservation standards. They're comprised of 5 individual steps. The first step is the assessing step, where you basically just take stock of your current situation that you're facing. Let's say in your project, in your conservation area, may it be a national park or a biosphere reserve or whatever your project focus is, right? And then there's a whole bunch of sub-steps that I'm going to show you in just a second. The second step of that cycle is the planning step. So you move away from what is happening now, and you plan your strategic actions, and you look into the future and trying to gauge, like, if we do these set of strategies that we decided on, then what will happen, right? So you build your theory of change and your results chains, and you set smart objectives and goals and all of that. So this is where you sort of like plan for the future. The third step is the implementation step or phase. This is where you actually implement everything that you just finished designing. This is where you have your work plan, your monitoring plans coming into action, and data starts to come in. And at some point, throughout that implementation phase, we want you to actually pause and reflect, or analyze and adapt, as the step is called, which is basically like a moment to pause, get your team together, and sort of like look back on how implementation has been going, to find out if you are still on track, right? Did the things really roll out the way you planned them? And in case that is so, well, then good job. Try to ensure that you will stay on track. But if something came up, which is usually the case, that you didn't foresee, this is the moment where you can take adaptive management actions, and you try to correct certain things and try to get back on track in order to reach the goals that you initially set, right? So those your objectives and your goals. And then last but not least, the fifth step is all about sharing your experiences, sharing your knowledge. And we talk about internal sharing, of course, within your organization, with your partners, with your donors, maybe, with the stakeholders, but also with the wider conservation community, because we strongly believe in, that we learn from one another, and we can become better the more we share and the more we talk about the successes, but also the failures. And I'm from Germany. We're not the greatest in sharing failures, but we're always advocating, to also say what didn't work, and where you fell down, and try to prevent others from, falling into the same traps, let's say, right? Okay, full stop. So these are the 5 steps. This is the cycle, the entire cycle. If you put all of these individual steps together, on the left-hand side, you see the manual, the guidebook, if you will, which is the latest version that we finished 2 years ago, and that is the current version that is out there. And then on the right-hand side, you see I put the sub-steps, or the units, or the chapters, if you will, of each of those big steps, right? And you can already see a little bit, what the details actually are of the assessing step, right? So you're trying to assess your critical threats. the conservation situation, you build a vision, you define your scope. So there are a lot of different sub-steps in that. And that's what I meant with those tools when I started this presentation, right? So if you only really need a threat assessment, well, then pick that tool and apply it, right? You don't need to go through the entire cycle. If you're into your project already, well, then that's fantastic. But then, maybe you just want to do a viability analysis, trying to assess the health status of the things that you're trying to protect. But yeah, full stop, right? But that's the entire cycle. And let me show you a little bit about the history. Before I go there, I wanted to mention, and I've mentioned it before, but I wanted to quickly, put an emphasis on that. The conservation standards are built on adaptive management principles, which is likely nothing new to you, at least the concept. And adaptive management many people perceive it as a trial and error kind of a thing. Like you try things out, and then if it works, great, and if not, well, then not. But it's really much more than that, right? It's an approach that helps you take small steps and learn while you're going. And Nick, I think in your introduction, you had a phrase that was so spot on, and I can't repeat it, so I'm not trying to. But adaptive management really is taking steps under precautionary principle, of course, so you don't try to do any damage, but it allows you to proceed within your planning and your implementation, even if you don't know everything about your conservation situation, which is always the case. We don't understand reality to 100%. These systems are hyper complex and we can't know everything. But adaptive management helps you to actually take steps forward, because we need to start implementing our strategic actions and not wait for knowing it all before we can then decide what would be the best step to take. So the conservation standards make use of those adaptive management or are highly advocating those adaptive management principles, if you will, right? Okay. Quick outlook or quick history lesson here, or a few minutes on how this all came about. There's that partnership called the Conservation Measures Partnership, and those logos that you see on this slide are currently all of the organizations that are part of that Conservation Measures Partnership, and all of these organizations endorse the conservation standards. Doesn't mean that these are the only organizations applying the open standards. The open standards or conservation standards are open source, so everybody can get access to the guidebook. You can use it. It's free of charge. We encourage everybody to just use it or have a look at it. You can get trained, for example, like through Conservation Careers. There is many organizations out there that also share guidelines for specific steps, and I mean it's a wild universe out there, all around good conservation planning, design planning, and implementation using the conservation standards. So this is the list of organizations that is currently trying to protect, let's say, the purity, or well, purity is maybe the wrong word, but the quality of the conservation standards, right? Because this is ongoing work always, so that the standards are never finished, right? There's new topics coming, climate change, human well-being. There's so many new topics always arising on the horizon that need to be incorporated. So these organizations sort of like try to ensure that that the standards are always up to date, right? 4 of these organizations back in the days, and this is going into the history part now, actually sat together, and that was before the conservation standards existed. And what they wanted to understand is they wanted to understand, or they wanted to learn from one another, and they wanted to understand, what are you doing? What are you doing? How can we learn from you? Like just exchanging thoughts, ideas, knowledge, experiences. And they quickly realized that they weren't really speaking the same language, right? So what someone would call an aim, someone else would call a target, someone else would call it a goal or an objective, and they would all mean exactly the same thing, but they would use different terminology. And so it was actually very difficult to compare and to exchange and to share knowledge and experiences and learn from one another, because they simply weren't speaking the same language. And that's when they started doing what is called a Rosetta Stone analysis, right? This is the famous Rosetta Stone that you see here. And they did something where they compared all of the lingo, all of the terminologies of all of these of these 4 organizations back in the day, and they came up with one common language, right? So they, for example, in this case, they said, let's all the things that we are trying to protect, like the forest, the tiger, the river, like the elements of biodiversity, let's all call them a target, right? And of course, there's a debate, maybe it would be better to call it a goal or, an aim, whatever. They settled, in this case, they settled on target, and they did that for all of the key terms. And by doing that, they created that one unified language that helped them to better understand what everybody was doing and therefore better learn from one another. Okay? And they did the same for defining which steps are crucial when it comes to planning and designing a project, a conservation project, and when it comes to the implementation and the pause and reflect phase, and so this entire cycle was therefore then also developed. It's not only about the lingo, but also about that common approach to how do we actually manage conservation projects, right? And of course, this went through, an iteration of many versions, like you've seen before on the right-hand side. This is the very latest one. But as I said, this is ongoing work, and I hope that maybe in 2, 3, 4 years we'll have, version number 5 that is then even more updated than the one that we currently have. Yeah, that's the current version. I also pulled up this map. This is a user-curated map that actually I started a few years ago, where I asked my network and said, hey, can everybody please just put a pin on the map where you have been or are still using the conservation standards, just so that we can, have something visually, nice, like a nice representation of, where we are all spread out. So this map is by no means complete. And some of these projects may have already come to an end, or maybe have gone through a life cycle and then are in a new phase now. But it still gives us a very good indication that, yeah, we are talking about a very global community. It is by now, luckily, a very global approach, because it used to come from the North American continent. And we have managed to actually spread around the globe and therefore, also gain that insight into all of those different situations on the ground, because of course, what has worked in the United States may also work somewhere in Korea, and vice versa, but it also may not, right? So the more diversity we can get in that community, the better, because yeah, there's more people applying it. There's more ideas, there's more approaches, and maybe just a nuance of someone else's project, gives you an idea of how to solve a tricky situation that you might face in your project. So I mentioned the conservation standards are an open source or based in open source principles. So if you type in conservationstandards.org, this is the website that you'll see. And actually, this is the hub, as we call it, because it is actually 3 different websites that it allows you to enter. You came for the conservation standards, you click on the middle one right here. Right? But if you are interested in what I have shown you before, the Conservation Measures Partnership, you could also go there and learn all about the organizations that are currently members of that partnership, what they do, how you can also get active in that partnership if you're interested in it. And then there is, on the right-hand side, you see the green column. That's the Conservation Coaches Network. I myself am a coach. So I coach others to apply the conservation standards. So there's the users that actually just use the standards. But then there's a few individuals, and by few, we are by now a network of over 1,600 people that help others apply the conservation standards. And it's people like me, independent consultants, guiding teams through processes, but it's also staff members of many of these organizations that you see in the CMP, in the Conservation Measures Partnership. And they just help their colleagues, go through certain steps of the standards. And so we built this network, which is called CCNet, Conservation Coaches Network, where we try to help others that are interested. And so that's a great resource if you're trying to find someone in your region that may be able to help out. And it's almost like, it feels like a family. You reach out to someone or to the regional, it's organized in regional networks. So if you're based in Europe, you would write to the European Conservation Coaches Network, and you would reach a few of us, and we would definitely do everything in our power to help you find, guidance, and help you out in whatever need you have. Same holds true for South America, North America, Asia, Southeast Asia. So check that out if you really try to find an individual trying to help you. But then for everything else, if you're just interested in the pure methodology or in the pure concept, then the conservation standards here right in the middle is where you would navigate to, right? So let's have a quick look at that website, just in case that after this webinar you want to learn more. First and foremost, this button right here in the top right-hand corner will lead you to the download section. This is where you can get access to the document that I showed you. You can download it free of charge. Fantastic, have a read. It's technical, but it's very readable. We try to really avoid like a very nerdy pamphlet. It's nicely designed, and it's really informative. And then what I also want to point out is this button right next to it, which is the resource library. So let's have a look at that one. The resource library. So on the Conservation Standards website, there is a huge library called the resource library. And if you browse that, you'll find everything from, and these are, well, everything from, let's say, case studies, right? There's journal articles, there is PowerPoint presentations, there's specific guidance on a sub-step of the standards that help you, I don't know, learn everything about a stress-based threat rating, which is a very technical thing, but there's guidance to it. And so if you're interested, you can download these documents here from the resource library. Some of them are a little older, some of them are from 2012, 2014, but we constantly add stuff to that library. You see here, 2020 does external financing really influence national commitments to biodiversity conservation. That's a case study. And yeah, if you read through it, if that is of interest to you, fantastic. If it's not, well, then just skip it, right? There is also, for example, training PowerPoints. This is guided towards people who really want to get a first look at the conservation standards in a more PowerPoint-esque approach. And also this is for those who try to then take that next step and actually teach others in using the conservation standards. So this is likely a little too much for you if you've never heard about the conservation standards, but again, it's free of charge. Feel free to check it out. It's, this work has just been completed at the beginning of this year by 4 of my very good friends and colleagues, and they did an amazing job. They're very nicely layouted, and yeah, and fantastic. A fantastic resource to have. And that is, in a nutshell, that is what the conservation standards are about, where they came from, why they exist, and who is out there, or what are the platforms where you can find the users or those who support others in applying the standards. And where you can find guidance materials and yeah, stuff. Nick, if there's nothing that I forgot, feel free to mention or remember me if you want me to highlight anything else. If not, happy to take question, maybe 1 or 2. I don't know. I haven't monitored the chat, obviously, but maybe you have.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You've been in presentation mode perfectly. Thank you so much. Yeah, and it's really nice to kind of hear the overview. What are they, where they came from, why are they important? Because I think most people, and to be honest, me included, sort of until the last maybe 6 months or so, I've not really been that engaged or understanding in the conservation standards, but to hear about the community that's out there, the 1,000+ people that are training, supporting other people to implement this and to use the same language, if you like, terminology, to work together, to kind of unify a concerted approach. I find it really powerful, and I think it's really great to be sharing this. And I feel so kind of privileged to be connected to you too, Felix. So thank you for kind of sharing your time and your knowledge and expertise, you know, and lovely pictures. Most of these pictures are your pictures, you know, they're great.
That's a little side project.
That's a little
It's a
side
hobby.
project, but it's a good one. And drone footage too, and other stuff that you've been sharing with me. Yeah. Thank you, everyone who's been kind of sharing in the chat. I've been enjoying the chat. Thank you. There's been a few people like connecting individually within that. That's what this is all about, community. So thank you for that. That's great. I've seen a few questions kind of drop in. If you want to kind of put some questions in there now about, you know, about what you've heard about the standards and project management design more generally, feel free to jump in that. Feel free to vote questions up if you like the look of them too, and you'd like us to definitely answer them. You know, we kind of, the ones with the most votes will get that response. I think what we might do actually, Felix, is like maybe answer 2 or 3 questions now, and then we talk a little bit about the course, and then we can also answer a few more questions at the end, you know, should we still have time, which I think we will, which I think we've got lots of time, which is great.
I see. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go on. Well, I was going to answer, there's a couple of questions I can kind of just maybe pitch there at the beginning, because one was in the chat early on from Sandy Lutz. Thank you very much. I thought it was a really interesting question.
I'm
didn't
reading
move
that
across,
one.
but I still want to touch on that. I thought it was a really interesting one. Sandy, I'm going to paraphrase rather than scroll up through my chat. It was something like, how is the conservation standards and the approach taken there different to, you know, regular project management, I guess, for want of a better word, you know, in brackets. So people think of project management, you know, for all sorts of streams of life, different industries, you know, whatever it might be. How are the standards different and perhaps unique to conservation?
Yeah, fantastic. I just quickly browsed through the questions, and that was exactly the one that I would have picked as well. Thank you, Sandy. Great question. So two things that I want to say to that. Like the adaptive management cycle that I showed you, or the conservation standards cycle, that's certainly nothing that, you know, we invented. Adaptive management has been around for years, right? Businesses use adaptive management principles. The army is using adaptive management principles. I mean, there's so many industries or sectors that want and need to be very agile and very observative, you know, for the small nuances and changes in order to adapt and in order to react to that. React in terms of like a strategic reaction. So that's certainly nothing that we would claim, you know, that we would have invented or anything like that. What the conservation project or what the conservation standards are doing is they put a very, I mean, the only focus is conservation projects, right? So everything related to conservation projects that is included in that guidebook, meaning that while a business that is, you know, maybe selling cars or smartphones or whatever tech is also applying, you know, project management principles, they certainly wouldn't have guidelines in, you know, for you to assess the health status of your biodiversity on site, right? Or they might not have, or they might have different criteria for a threat rating, because they also face threats, right, in their day-by-day business. But what we consider threats in the conservation world is what is threatening our biodiversity elements, right? The tiger in the forest, the rivers that we are trying to protect, the functionality of the ecosystems that we want to maintain or get back or, you know, secure. And so those types of assessments, they are very much tailor-made for conservation situations, right? So assessing the threats, rating those threats, the criteria that are used are tailor-made for a conservation-specific situation. So that is likely the nuance or, you know, the difference in traditional project management versus conservation project management.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anything else to add? I feel like I maybe cut you off now.
No, that's it. Okay. If you want to add anything, Nick.
No, I mean, I'm not an expert in this at all. So, you know, I'm very happy to be sort of guided and to learn from you. And actually that sort of links in quite nicely to another question I've seen in the chat. Feel free to use the question and answers, guys, as well. That's a good place because we can vote and upvote, and that helps kind of streamline things as well. Yeah, you're welcome, Sandy, saying thank you. Owen asked in the chat, and I will go to question I answer in a second. Do either of you have classical training in project management, or have both of you practiced project management as your careers have progressed? Felix, beyond before conservation standards, like, you know, what was your experience or training in project management, or was this your entry point?
So my background lies in international forest ecosystem management. So my first studies were forest ecosystems and managing those forest ecosystems, and my emphasis was always on the conservation side of managing a forest ecosystem. And then I did another study program which was called Global Change Management, which was more on a systems type analysis level. And there I already had my focus on conservation. So therefore I was using that for conservation type systems. And I've been engaged with the conservation standards for the last 12 years. That's actually one of the most influential courses that I received in my study program back in the days. And my professor is one of the early adopters and promoters of, good practices, adaptive management principles in conservation. And so that's how I got engaged and started to slide into this world. And then I somehow became who I am today, someone who works independently, supporting people and project teams out there around the world. And throughout that career, I have been, first of all, trained as a coach, trained as a coach trainer, and now trained as a trainer of trainers. So I actually train new people to become trainers. So very advanced coaches, I make them trainers, and full stop. So that's my project management input. But I've never been with the free industry or a big company that did project management and then converted to conservation. I've always been within conservation, but have also always there done project management.
Yeah, great answer. And when you hear about, being a trainer of trainers, I kind of wonder who trains you. So who's the trainer of the trainer of the trainers? I mean,
That's
how far do we go? Yeah. Also, like listening to you and reflecting on this idea of adaptive management, you talked about that quite a lot, and learning as we go and sharing those lessons. That's so important to this. It reminds me of it was a podcast discussion we had with a professor also, Bill Sutherland at Cambridge, about conservation evidence. And he used the phrase that really sticks in my mind still, which is we should do more of what's been proven to work and less of what's not been proven to work. And this is all about, finding the things that have been proven to work and doing more of them. In medicine, you don't need to take pills that have evidence behind that they work. And it's the same sort of, that's the way I view it anyway, in my sort of simple view of life. And I think this is a good way of thinking about it too. Briefly, Owen, have I had any training? I haven't had any training really in project management through my career before Conservation Careers. I think like probably 80% of the people in that poll have done it, sort of learned on the job, which is the slow way of doing it. It's a slow way of learning. I feel like, I could have sped up my progression when I was developing projects and programs, which is like a collection of projects working together. When I worked back in the day for a charity in the Pacific. And if I'd have learned, more formally, how to apply these sorts of standards, which were still evolving at the time, it would have helped me enormously. I'd have had more impact, I'd have had, better outcomes too. So yeah, I kind of wish I had, and I wish more of this training was available, but I'm delighted that we're kind of sharing opportunities now around this as well. Thank you. Excuse me. I'm going to jump. There is a question in here. I'm going to use it as a jumping off point to then talk about our course. So forgive me for that. So Antonio Chason, I'm sorry if I said your name incorrectly. Great presentation, Felix. I reiterate that. Thank you. I was just wondering what the general structure of the course through Conservation Careers would be, should we enroll in it? Okay. Thank you. That's a perfect lead in for me to talk about the course. 2 or 3 people have also said, can we share the materials that we talked about this evening, or can they get hold of materials? Felix, you talked about a lot of free materials that are all out there online. Hopefully that's answered a few of those questions. We will be sharing a recording of this as well, first thing tomorrow by email. So if you want to watch it back at any time, that will be available too. We're not planning to share a PDF. I hope that's okay, but you can always watch the recording back. Okay, so what I'm going to do then, Owen, you're very welcome. Is I'm going to talk then briefly.
You want me to stop sharing?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I think I've just managed to do that. Okay, and I'm going to start sharing my screen. So as you've probably heard, and as you've just heard in one of the chats, we have just we've launched and we're currently promoting a course around conservation project management and design. So if you want to gain the skills in managing and designing projects using the standards, you just heard a bit about from Felix, which is the leading approach within the sector, you can currently enroll in our training course. And it is open until this Friday. So you've still got 2 or 3 days left. It closes Friday midnight here in the UK. And it's the first time we've run this course. It's a totally new course for us. I've wanted to do this for a few years now. I'm super excited to kind of have it out there. We currently have 33% off as well. So if you're interested in it, I'm happy to kind of walk you through a few of the details now as well, and also answer any questions you might have. Okay, so what is it? It's a self-paced course to help you to become more impactful and employable. Okay, and what I'm going to do, the easiest way to do is actually just kind of share really my screen and kind of walk you very quickly through our sales page, because it answers a lot of questions as we kind of go through that. So let me just find my share button. Where is my share button? There it is. Hiding. Okay. Can you see that, Felix?
I can. Yeah,
great.
fantastic.
Okay, so this is the page. I'll actually just drop this in the chat as well while we're going, in case any of you guys on the call wish to kind of jump and have a little look at it too. Bear with me, guys. There we go. Okay, so it's a self-paced online course, closes this Friday for enrollment. We have 33% off at the moment. Okay, as we kind of talked to the top, we analyze nearly 36,000 jobs, and 55% of employers are looking for exactly these skills in the sector. And as we've also seen, I think through that poll at the beginning, 80% of conservationists, don't classically have training or specific experience in this. It helps you to be more impactful. It helps you to be more employable. If you want to find out a little bit more about the conservation standards, we also kind of do that here on the sales page too. And what we're going to do and what we're going to cover, and answering one of the questions there as well, is we kind of walk through the kind of 5 phases of the conservation standards cycle, that framework: the assess, plan, implement, analyze and adapt, and then finally share. Okay, so we have an introductory module that gives you a bit more of a detailed overview that you just heard from Felix, goes into a little bit more detail of the background of why it's important. And then we have modules and units around each one of these kind of 5 areas, these kind of 5 cycles, the toolbox that kind of Felix, you introduced at the beginning. Now, it's a self-paced online course. Okay, so you can go entirely at your own pace. You have a whole year within which to complete and and to use the training. Okay, so you can go and kind of jump in and kind of work through a module a week, say for 5, 6, 7 weeks, and get it done. Or you can go at your own pace. You have a whole year. If life happens, gets in the way, if you want to kind of enroll now with a discount and do it a little bit later, that's absolutely fine. Okay. Anyone who completes, and I saw another question there about certificates, anyone who completes the course gets a certificate of completion. And through the course, although it's like kind of self-paced video learning with quiz-based knowledge checks in as well, alongside that, you also get support from Felix, okay, from myself, and also from the wider, what we call the CC Pro private community. I can talk a bit more about that if you're interested, but it means that you're never alone. Okay, if you've got a question and you want some feedback, you want to go more detail into something, we're there to support you. We're also planning a live welcome event next week, once the course really kicks off with our first cohort. And we'll have another kind of live Q&A session like this, just for participants to be answering questions and supporting one another kind of through the course. So you're not going to be alone. Okay, you've got our support through the entire journey to kind of implement the course. And also, if you don't like it, it's worth me mentioning now. I'll probably mention it at the bottom of the page too. There is a guarantee. It's a 14-day money-back guarantee. If you don't like it for whatever reason, we'll give you your money back. No questions asked. Okay, that's kind of rock solid. You know who Felix is by now. So training outline, the question. First step is step 1, assess. Okay, I won't talk through all the bullet points. Okay, but you can see the sorts of topics that we're going to cover. Felix, feel free to jump in if you want to kind of cover off any more detail here than you feel that would be valuable to people. Otherwise, I'll just kind of keep scrolling down.
Maybe just one question. I'm actually replying to a few of the questions that came, but one just struck me that something that I didn't mention, and that is Prina is asking, are the conservation standards context specific, meaning only for a specific location or geography? And I would extend that question to say only for specific types of conservation projects. And the answer to that is absolutely not. You can apply the conservation standards wherever you are in the world to almost any type of conservation situation or conservation type of project that you have. So if you're trying to protect just this one single species in a very tiny location, fantastic. If you're trying to fight illegal wildlife trade on a global scale, fantastic. If you're trying to influence policymakers in the European Union, fantastic. So the standards are there to support and help you and be guidance for you. They're not the silver bullet. They will not solve your all of your problems, with the click of just one button, but you can certainly apply them in any type of context or for any type of topic. Sorry.
That's a great question. Yeah, thank you for chipping in. I've just slowly scrolled as you've gone to kind of see those kind of 5 framework that you've already heard about, okay, that we're going to cover through the course. Is it right for you? You might be sat there thinking, is this right for me? Well, it's typically right for kind of 4 different types of people. So if you're a career switcher, okay, so if you're working in a different sector right now, whatever that might be, and you'd like to convert to switch your career into conservation, this is a kind of good training route, a kind of one of the solid foundational aspects, knowledge, skills for you to acquire that, you know, we know employers are looking for in the sector. So it's right for you. Okay, if you're a professional conservation, if you work in conservation already and you don't have, you know, the training, the formal training or skills in this, it's a great way to kind of find more, to unlock more impact, okay, to develop, design and manage better projects, okay, going forward. And it'll speed up that progression. As I say, I wish I'd had it, you know, 10, 15 years ago when I was doing and managing those sorts of projects myself. If you're a student at university, you know, I think now is a great time to be alongside your studies, to be kind of upskilling and getting the sorts of things that employers are looking for. Okay, so that when you come to graduation, you come to job seeking, the next person type, okay, then you're kind of, you know, standing out from the crowd. As you saw, 80% of people don't have these skills. Okay, so this is going to help you to kind of become more competitive and more employable. Alongside the actual training, okay, and the support, you get the support from within our private CC Pro community. Now in CC Pro, we have people going through other courses that we have. We have 5 or 6 different courses now at Conservation Careers. We also have our regular members, our Conservation Career Academy members in there as well. You guys who are going through this course will get your own unique private space group where you can watch the video learning, you can share and interact with one another. Okay, you can upload any tasks as well and talk to Felix, myself. Okay, but also you're part of this wider community as well. You gain access to kind of weekly events that we have, at least weekly events where we have Q&As with myself, other Conservation Careers members of staff and coaches. You can also network with the other 700 plus members that are in there right now. You can share your feedback. You can even upload your CV and resume and ask for feedback from others. You can share your comments with others. We do lots of stuff that's really engaged, supportive, friendly. It's my favorite place on the internet to kind of go every day. So as part of the course, you gain access to that private community, again, for a year, okay? If you've got any kind of more detailed questions, we kind of do list the FAQs here towards the bottom of the page. And the biggest question of always is, well, how much does it cost? Okay, well, the regular cost of the program in dollars is $395, pounds it's $295, in euros it's $350. But because this is our first cohort, okay, and the deadline closes on Friday, this Friday, we're releasing the course with a 33% discount. So you can actually get it right now up until Friday for $265, pounds 195, euros 230. You can see that on the screen, okay? But again, that discount expires on Friday and the enrollment closes. So if you're interested, you know, don't hang around. It is there available to you right now. And it comes with that 14-day money back guarantee as my voice kind of starts to fail as well. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview. I'm very happy to answer any more questions you can have. I'll jump back to that kind of questions box here as well and see if anything else is kind of going on in there. I can see some chat going on there in the background as well. Okay, so Bashru, you're asking, do you get certificates? Hopefully, I think we've answered that. Okay, so yes, you get a certificate of completion. Okay, so if you work through the modules, answer that. What the knowledge checks will be kind of short quiz based learning, just to make sure you understood the concepts, you understood the key aspects of each module, of each unit within that module, and it allows you kind of move on. Okay, and through that we can see, yes, you're understanding, yes, you're kind of progressing, and at the end it then triggers a certificate of completion. So yes, you do get one. Other questions relating to the standards more generally or specific to the training, we're very happy to answer them. We've got 10 minutes, that's absolutely fine. Lim, I'm jumping to the Q&A wall here as well. You're an educator right now. You really want to career switch to work into conservation. The 5 steps listed in the standards are essentially what you do on a daily basis, both on small and big scales. How should you market yourself when looking for a conservation job? Okay, so that's a really big question about, you know, how do you secure a paying job? How do you switch your careers in? The course will help, okay, because I think employers around the globe more and more are recognizing the standards the name, the terminology, and as more people are kind of getting behind that. So to have that on your CV would certainly help. Just from a kind of career coach perspective as well, putting the kind of course to one side for a minute. I think if you're looking to switch your career into conservation, it's really important that two things really is one, to thoroughly understand yourself and your career to date. Okay, so what have you been doing today that you love doing? What are you great at doing? And what causes are you particularly really interested in? Think about this thing called ikigai, you know, where the kind of three things come together that helps you to find that niche, that kind of area that you're going to find more impact, more enjoyment, okay, and be more competitive around within the sector. So get really clear about yourself and where you want to go. Having understood where you want to go, then really it's a case of saying, well, what employers are looking for and where are my skills gaps? It's likely, just as you're recognizing there, that some things, some experience you have already, okay, in your back pocket are very transferable and employers are looking for it. So if you've got great project management experience already, fantastic. We know employers are looking for that. You need to talk to employers and kind of showcase that to people. But also it's probably likely that there are some gaps as well that you need to fill. So think about how best you can fill them, whether it's through online training, whether it's through in-person internship volunteers that you can create yourselves or go off and find that are online, or maybe it's some specific education that you might need to fill. Okay, get clear about who you are, where you want to go, find the gaps, fill them, and put in great quality applications. Okay, that's the nutshell version of it. But thank you so much for your question. Juliet, you got 3 votes, so I'm going to jump to your question as well. Would you say that training in project management via courses is sufficient to gain a job as a project manager or assistant, or is practical experience more necessary? What is the best way to start gaining more direct project management experience, e.g. if you're working in another area of conservation? I think that's a really great question. Yeah, Felix, what's your reflections on that? Did you hear and see that question from Juliet?
Sorry, Nick, I'm typing, so I didn't catch the last half sentence. Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to read the question out again, so it's a good one, and I'll respond to it too. I think it's really interesting. So Juliet's asking, you know, what would you say that training in project management via courses is sufficient to gain a job as a project manager assistant, or is practical experience more necessary? What's the best way to start gaining more direct project management experience, especially if you're working in another area of conservation at the moment? So is a course enough? And if you need experience, what's a good way of getting experience?
I may not be the 100% perfect person to ask that question because I have never been employed by an organization as a project manager, right? But with those clients or with those teams that I've worked with, I can say that project managers don't necessarily come in as trained and very experienced project managers. It also depends on the type of organization, of course, right? If you're looking at the WWF, there's usually people that, you know, gradually grow into those positions. So you would start, you know, being an assistant to a program manager. And then there's always, you know, people coming and going and leaving and taking different positions. And then you could grow into the position of a project manager, maybe a little bit easier. But that is a very, you know, WWF is a huge ecosystem as an organization. I mean, it's gigantic. And therefore, and though their projects are also likely the more higher level or more complex, not more important, but more complex projects, right? That may be on a national level or on a continental level. And so I would assume that there needs to be a progression rather than just coming in with just an online course. But knowing that many people don't have or lack, and we've seen that in the poll, right, Nick? Don't have that, and I know that employers are seeking those types of skills. I'd say it's definitely nothing, you know, bad to have. That's for sure. Yeah. But it's a very it's a very organizational or job dependent situation there.
Yeah, and I would also follow up. Thank you, Felix. That I think, you know, we often say conservation careers, like, you know, experience beats education hands down, actually. So being able to show to an employer that you've done something to a certain level really stands out in applications. It really stands out in interviews and answers a lot of questions, you know, of itself. So it's one thing to say, I know something, I learned it through an online course like ours or something else. But then taking that learning and actually then implementing it is so powerful. It really makes you more employable. So what I would say is, find projects you can get involved with. If you can't find projects you can get involved with, either by sort of directly doing some research online, finding projects you like the look of, finding the project managers, reaching out and talking to them, networking, and see if you can get involved as a volunteer or an intern. If you can't do that, excuse me, then I'd encourage you to think about even starting your own project. So understand, the process of designing a project. We can teach you that through the course. You could learn that other ways as well. Okay. From there, you could actually think about, well, what sort of project could I start as in my own, in my own time, as a volunteer. And again, that shows great initiative to volunteers as well, to employers, sorry. Start a project, get it going. You can think about, I think about the project cycle even more broadly than we described this evening. So you can design a project, you can then fundraise for that project, however that could be with a donor, or could be crowdfunding something else to get it off the ground if it needs some funding. Then you can manage it really well. Again, standards come in here again really well. Then you can tell the world about it, you can communicate it. And I think those are the kind of the core skills that employers are really looking for across the board. Can you design something? Can you fund it? Can you manage it? And can you communicate it? Okay, so you can learn it, but as much as you can implement it, and then you can showcase that evidence to employers, the better. So I think that's a great question. Yeah, so thank you for sharing. We are up on time, and thank you. I can see Felix is frantically kind of typing answers, so we appreciate that as well. Thank you everyone for your wonderful engagement, okay, this evening. Hello, Christy, I can see you there in the chat as well. We haven't got time to share resources, but we will be sharing this webinar, okay, and Christy, you'll be sharing the webinar by email, okay, later on today. So it'll be coming into inboxes tomorrow. Just a final reminder, okay, the course is open till Friday. If you're interested in, you want to jump in and enroll, there's a 14-day money back guarantee. So you can always try it. If you don't like it, you can always come out, okay, that's totally open to you. We will support you through that learning. You get a full year's access, and you have quite a tasty discount available till Friday. So have a little look if you're interested. Okay, and it's been really great kind of sharing this evening, this time with you. Felix, thank you so much for being a great guest host this evening. Thank you for being a wonderful course guide as well. It's been great kind of working with you, get to know you, and it's great to kind of share your knowledge and expertise with this kind of global community of people who really need and deserve this training. So thanks for jumping on, Felix.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure. It's going to be fun.
It's going to be great. We're looking forward to it. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all for your kind words. I can see you there in the chat too. I appreciate it. Sandy, Owen, Elena. Always nice to see you, Elena. Okay. And Antonia and everyone else. I can't keep up with you. Thank you, Rosie. Okay. Take care. Stay safe, stay well, and keep conservationing. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.